Hello and welcome to another episode of Combat Analysis. Starting off with a fairly populated Rockstand game on Despa server. The opening looks a little weak, but if this player hadn't run into the middle of my team, I would have had a good chance to hit him from behind out here. So I don't think it was a bad idea per se to posture the way that I did. Here I have to fend off Creslow as he's getting dangerously close. And then a quick pick to my right shows him leaving, and therefore I feel confident in advancing on these two guys. Chamber feint to parry here feels excusable since I have a full stamina pool. Then move a bit to the left to give myself more time to read the slash. This hit in the back hurts my momentum a bit, but since one of the guys runs away and the other one dies at the same time, I still manage to stay alive. Definitely a bit of luck involved in this parry. Here follows a successful mid-riposte parry, and thankfully the bardish dies to just one overhead riposte. This situation is a little tricky, and I think what happened is my parry in response to the Evening Star came out just a little too late to qualify for misdetection, because I get a full duration recovery phase thereafter. If I hadn't, it would have been easier for me to wind up again and hit the Evening Star here, but now it's more of a wash in terms of who has initiative. Therefore I opt for a kick, which definitely is valid from a temporal standpoint, but a lot riskier spatially. This part's fairly frustrating. I really wasn't expecting the Evening Star to parry in response to my underhand feint, and aimed for the Fox instead as he was the most likely to attack me next. But evidently I just barely missed a chance to do some very hefty damage to the Evening Star. Still would have required a headshot if I wanted him completely dead, but it was definitely a missed opportunity nonetheless. What I probably could have done is hit them both with the stab if I had planned ahead a little better. So eventually I end up dying to Creslow behind me. There's no immediate solution to that, it does just happen sometimes. There also aren't too many categorical mistakes in this one, but more so a general lack of aggression I feel. Unless you count the mid-riposte parry into second riposte as one, I didn't utilize any parry bypassing techniques throughout the fight. A lot of the time I'm fighting weapons that are slower than mine, and could benefit from some early feinting. That is to say feinting without necessarily losing initiative at the event of a counter chamber. To draw a couple examples, I could have done a combo feint here, or a chamber feint here. Could have also riposted here, which would have allowed me to keep attacking despite the hits in my back. Here I also could have tried to force out some parries from my two opponents. It did happen accidentally, but since I failed to capitalize on it, it doesn't matter. And here I had a perfect opportunity to feint my counter chamber, since the Evening Star was swinging into my initiative and was very likely to parry. He proceeded to do exactly that, and I got nothing for it. Let's do the full speed replay and then move on to the next fight. In this one, both of the teams managed to cram together in the middle section of the map, and that sets us up for a pretty intense fight. Both of these guys at the very front have long ass weapons, which means I probably have to parry first, but also have the potential for a cheap lean back based grab of initiative. This guy ends up stabbing out of reach, which is why I spring forward to hit him, but since the other guy stabs in my general direction in turn, I back off with a feint to parry. Looking back at it now, it seems I could have maybe redirected my stab at him instead for a potential flinch, but in that moment it was a little unclear if I was gonna have enough reach to hit him. He could have decided to walk backwards instead, and then I would have been far out of my depth aiming for him. Sadly a bit too late on the parry of the bardish here, but I continue with two chamber morphs in response to his attacks thereafter. The reason why it kinda makes sense is because there are so many people around, and I'm fairly unlikely to actually have to parry him, since only one of us has to. Going for the chamber morph makes my counterattack come out quicker than an unsuccessful parry into windup from neutral would have. Of course, on the second morph, a feint follow-up could have been pretty well placed, since he had just gotten whacked in the back by my friend, and was momentarily unable to chamber. Unfortunately, I do get hit twice by teammates in the chaos, and it hurts my health pool a bit. The flinch aspect of it probably didn't matter too much, since it looks as though MBCC would have parried anyway. Not too hyped about this stab riposte, as I am only fighting one guy. The slash is slightly better, but the chamber feint to parry into stab riposte is overly defensive, and serves little purpose offensively, since I am still only fighting one person. As a last resort, I do at least pull off a successful edging attempt into stab follow-up. I think I held this feint for way too long though. It was very likely to get outpaced by a chamber. The fact that I'm looking up as if going for an axle only increases the likelihood of him going for an early chamber. But luckily, I do survive by just a hair. So now I'll take a quick look around and decide to try to help my still breathing ally. This looks kinda funky, but I probably would have been better off going straight for a stab follow-up instead of the jump kick. Since he had just gotten parried by my ally, he was gonna have to heart rate my initial stab anyway. No need to kick there. I should have actually just kept moving forward here, due to my temporal initiative, but I still managed to hit him first, so no real harm was done by the pause. I remember thinking that I got gambled here at the time of playing, but after looking at the replay more closely, that doesn't appear to be the case at all. If we assume that these are the two first frames of our respective windups, we're only talking a 125 millisecond real world difference between the events. And with a 110 millisecond weapon based windup discrepancy in my favor, we could even go as far as to say that I'm technically gambling in this case. But more likely is it would have been down to which one of us managed to hit the other at an early point in the release window, since that can vary a fair bit. What should be emphasized, however, is that I could have wound up much sooner, for a greater chance of getting him to panic and ultimately die to a follow-up attack. Because I did not, my second attack ended up chambering instead. I'm not a huge fan of my movement here, moving into the middle of all three instead of backtracking away and trying to keep the other two players on the opposite side of the nearest enemy, also known as the pivot. At the time of this riposte, the most important thing is to hit the middle opponent as quickly as possible, since he's otherwise the next person to land a hit on me. And I think I managed that alright. Somewhat surprisingly, the halberd player dies in the same vein, which is very nice. This also mitigates the damage my previously mentioned footwork caused. Here it looks to me as if it would have been a good time for a riposte kick. This guy was just crouch walking up in my face, and if I had just stopped backtracking, he would have been right up in it. That also would have allowed for a combo slash follow-up grab of initiative against them both, which could have led to even more successful hits. I probably should have started a stab riposte here. It would have hurt my turn cap a little bit, which is a downside, and I was afraid I wouldn't be able to turn enough to see Iron Fury if I did, but it would have helped the aggression quite a bit to at least threaten them with a counter attack. Instead, I lost a lot of momentum just trying to parry them both. This is probably the best shot I took at forcing out a parry in this last segment, with a chamber feint in response to his slash. Sadly, he does appear to read this one as well. The stab follow-up is definitely the right choice, but again, it doesn't matter since he didn't panic beforehand. Here at the conclusion of the fight, my camera work was just too slow. I really would have had to flick my mouse back and forth in order to see them both in time to read and parry the guy on the right.
Soldier? Yes, sir. Surely. Certainly. You, sir, surely. Are by far the worst.
Up next are two shorter engagements, the first of which kinda went exactly as I wanted, whereas the second did not. This one starts off with me getting off a successful feint on this guy, winding up on my ally, which leads into a parry into riposte stab on Sasta, who parries unsuccessfully just before in response to my ally's miss. At this point I could have kept running up on his right side with a combo slash to continue advancing. That probably would have been the best idea. Instead I sat back and waited for the messer to attack again. Here I lose initiative to his chamber and have to wait for a parry. We continue with some back and forth. Until he goes for another feint, which I chamber feint successfully, and so he goes down. The whole thing has taken a little bit too much time for me to be able to help either of my allies though. That being said, I do still have time for a hit in his back before he's turned around to parry. Since I know the other guy is running up on me, I continue with a combo kick but feint it as soon as I see how far away he really is. Here I try to go for a lean back feint on the guy on the right, but decide to parry as he's gotten a little too close for comfort. He does however still miss, which means I get to attack yet again. I continue with a more feint attempt, but since he parries in response to the initial wind-up and will be out of recovery by the time my next attack lands, I make a split second decision to target switch to the other guy. And now this guy is in reach of my combo kick. And after that I just have to turn around one more time for a final stab to close out the fight. I don't believe the greatsword could have even hit me in the back while I was spinning around. Looking at it here in the editor, there's about a 1700 millisecond interval between my two hits on him. On his end, we're talking a 1 second attack recovery from getting hit, plus a 575 millisecond slash wind up at minimum. And it seems unrealistic that he'd be able to connect early enough thereafter to outpace my stab under those conditions. Smooth fight for me in summary. Moving on to the final clip. Opening's pretty good, I would say. I managed to claim initiative even against this longer weapon with a successful feint. Truth be told, that may have been in response to my ally on the right instead of me, but either way we come out on top. Sadly my teammate's miss does reset his parry cooldown, and he can parry anyway. Here I failed to parry even though I could have, also thanks to the miss detector. I was just a little slow on the button. Fabian hits and flinches his teammate as well, and so my parry in response to the war axe also fails to connect. Here we indulge in a little bit of back and forth. Then I try for a jump over his overhead. The jump in and of itself is pretty good, as far as direction and everything goes, because you should try to jump diagonally as illustrated by vector n, here defined as the sum of a and b, where a is the velocity and direction of the opponent, and b is of equal size and in the direction of their strike, both isolated to the x by y plane. That way you have the best chance of evading it and escaping the opponent's vision. But since he accelerated this one, it was pretty unlikely to work, and I just ended up chambering in air for an awful lot of stam. The jump also made it harder for me to see ICC approach, whose stab I then failed to parry, and it is pretty clear I should have just stayed on the ground for a better chance of reading them both. The chamber wasn't gonna flinch ICC in time either way, so there was nothing to be gained there. Jumping really only makes sense if it's clear that they're going for a toe drag. If I had been quick enough to notice the miss by my teammate versus Fabian, it would have been smarter to redirect the stab towards the war axe, or to go for another feint and second attempt at breaking through Fabian's defense. The main issue in this fight though, is that I'm not up to speed on my own parries. One of the 3 occasions was obstructed by my decision making, but the other 2 were just down to me playing badly. Thank you for watching this episode of Combat Analysis. If you liked it and want to see more of these, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Otherwise, I'll see you all on the battlefield instead. Alright, Burkus out.